Thanks for joining us on Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week on the program, we'll be dissecting President Bola Tinubu's outing at the 78th UNGA. Joining me for the conversation is retired career diplomat and former permanent secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Promises to be very interesting. But let's check in on those diplomatic headlines. We'll be right back.
Cooperation between Nigeria and China is growing stronger by the day, all thanks to China's offer of opportunities to keep improving the Nigerian economy and the people. The height of the partnerships and cooperation was highlighted at the celebration of the National Day for both countries, as well as the Mid-Autumn Festival and inauguration of the fourth session of the Chinese Enterprises Association established in Nigeria, CCF for short.
Nigeria is a very important strategic partner of China, and our two countries developed in many areas, just like political and economic and people-to-people exchange. So I really will that our cooperation and economic and people-to-people exchange will strengthen in the future.
China has got Nigeria as a match when it comes to culture. I'm sure you saw real infusion of both cultures, Nigeria and China's. That goes to say that if we collaborate, we can do so many things together on a positive note. And that is where President Bola Tinubu is taking Nigeria, collaborating with nations who are prosperous and industrious to take Nigeria to its proper position on the global scale.
French President Emmanuel Macron says his country will end its military cooperation with Niger and pull its 1,500 troops out of the African country by the end of the year, following the military coup there. The move is a blow to France's counter-terrorism operations in the Sahel and France's influence in the region. President Macron, however, says France will not be held hostage by the putschists. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has met the President and Minister of Defense of Djibouti, kicking off his tour of Africa on Sunday, September the 24th. Mr. Austin reinforced cooperation between the two nations and discussed efforts to enhance military cooperation and increase regional stability. His tour continues to Kenya and Angola.
Welcome back. President Bola Tinubu had a number of meetings on the sidelines of the 78th UNGA in New York. He met with American and Nigerian businessmen, the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and had a town hall with the Nigerian community in America. Perhaps the most interesting part of his participation at the UNGA was his speech to world leaders. I'll leave it to my colleague Larry Lasise to tell the story.
World leaders arriving for the general debate of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly taking place in New York. The theme for this session is rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 agenda and its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all. The UN Secretary General warned that the world is becoming unhinged and called for clear and decisive reforms.
We are inching ever closer to a great fracture in economic and financial systems and trade relations, one that threatens a single open internet with diverging strategies on technology and artificial intelligence and potentially clashing security frameworks. It is high time to renew multilateral institutions based on 21st century economic and political realities rooted in equity, solidarity, and universality, and anchored in the principles of the United Nations Charter and international law.
Presidents scheduled to deliver addresses were called to the podium one after the other. Their presentations describe their individual perspectives on the world's problems and their solutions.
We stand with the African Union and ECOWAS and other regional bodies to support constitutional rule. We will not retreat from the values that make us strong. We will defend democracy, our best tool to meet the challenges we face around the world.
If we continue to prioritize national interests, private interests, or just some particularistic interests of individual actors, and leave the resolution of global problems on the sidelines, we will extinguish ourselves as a civilization.
In his inaugural appearance at the General Assembly, President Bola Tinubu took to the podium. His address made a determined push for enhanced international cooperation and partnership with African nations and other developing countries.
To keep faith with the tenets of this world to this body and the theme of this year's assembly, the poverty of nations must end. The pillage of one nation's resources by overreach of farms and people of stronger nations must end. The will of the people must be respected. This beautiful, generous, and forgiving planet must be protected.
In a timely speech, the president emphasizes the need for a united front against the theft of Africa's mineral wealth, an affirmation of democratic governance, and ensuring that climate change is addressed with consideration for Africa's economic peculiarities.
We desire a beautiful, prosperous, vibrant, democratic living space for our people, where we do it. To the rest of the world, I say, work with us as true friends and partners. Africa is not a problem to be avoided, nor is it to be pitied. Africa is nothing less than the key to the world's future.
Now, speaking separately, there appears to be some agreement among these leaders that steps must be taken to address the evolving and unique challenges facing the world. But what many would like to see in the coming days is a commitment to concretize the words spoken here. From New York, Lanre Lasisi for Channels Television News.
Joining us now is former permanent representative at the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi. He joins me from Abuja. Ambassador Keshi, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
The UN General Assembly is over. The president is reportedly back in the country. What do you make of Nigeria's outing at the 78th UNGA?
Well, it looks as if it was a very good outing. In the sense that they accomplished what they wanted to do. Speak at the UN, ring the bell at NASDAQ. Never mind if they were not the first African president. Met some business leaders. I'm not too sure they met the real business leaders they wanted to meet, but they met some. On the whole, I think that they probably accomplished what they set out to do, and this is normal anyway when it comes to UNGA. This is what most presidents actually set out to do: deliver a speech at the United Nations and lay out what you want to do, and then use the opportunity to meet other heads of states, and finally see whether you can meet some businessmen, particularly from the United States.
Yes, and speaking of which, well, even if he did, there is no video evidence anywhere of the president meeting with the U.S. president. He was also scheduled to meet with other American business leaders. I mentioned a few of them. I think the head of Google or something, and other key business leaders who have businesses here in Africa. But the U.S. president's meeting was highly publicized. That meeting we don't see ever happened. Why do you think that is?
I think this is why or where presidential spokespersons and the Ministry of Information as well as the presidency need to be very careful. They need to, they need to be sure of what they are telling the Nigerian people. Look, this is similar, and I'm beginning to see some similarity between what these guys are doing and what Buhari did. Remember when Buhari was going to UNGA, Sheikh Musa was out there boisterously telling us that Buhari will be the first president to stay in Blair House, until some of us gave him a list of Nigerian leaders and African leaders who have stayed in that house. Well, the difference between this and that is very simple. At least I credit the spokesperson for having the courage to come out and apologize for the misinformation or for the mistake that was made. Sheikh Musa never apologized to us. Whatever he says, part of the nonsense he said most of the time and is corrected. He just thinks that he has said it. So do whatever you want to do. At that time, go to court wasn't a popular refrain.
And just to clarify, you're referring to the NASDAQ thing that the presidential spokesperson said that the president was the first.
That he came out to apologize. In the case of I'm just saying, in the case of Sheikh Musa, I never even bothered to apologize that despite the correction that was made by everybody, that he made a mistake. So this is reasonably a good start, but they need to be very careful. On the issue of Joe Biden, I think they need to also explain to us. Because not only, look, they make so much noise about meeting the president of the United States. Yes, the president of the United States is probably the most powerful man on earth. You know, even though sometimes I think that the most powerful president is the Nigerian president because he can do and undo. But the United States president, as we saw during the Trump era, can't do and undo. You know, so we need an explanation as to what happened. Not only Joe Biden, there were some key businessmen that the president was supposed to meet that they didn't meet.
Let's look at the speech he gave at the UNGA. It was about 18 minutes long, more or less. And it was in the afternoon. Many world leaders present, and I'm sure you watched, because I noticed how empty the room was when he was giving his speech. A lovely speech, I must say. The president advocated for Africa, saying Africa has been asking for the same level of political commitment and devotion of resource that described the Marshall Plan. He says we realize that underlying conditions and causes of the economic challenges facing today's Africa are significantly different from those of post-war Europe. We're not asking for identical programs and actions. What we seek is an equally firm commitment to partnership. We seek enhanced international cooperation with African nations to achieve the 2023 agenda and sustainable goals. How do you think this may have resounded with leaders of the UNGA, especially those who were not in the room when he was making the speech?
First, let me say this, Amarachi, and in fairness to everybody, you know, this is what goes on at the UN. There are some presidents that the world wants to listen to. One, of course, is the president of the United States. Everybody wants to listen to the president of the United States, and he speaks first, most often or second, you know, oftentimes. There are others like that, particularly in times of crisis. Everybody wants to listen to, you know. But when you see a hall as empty as it is, you know, in the first day, it just shows you that, and I'm not very sure, normally what happens is this, that countries struggle because they know the first session, the opening session is always packed full. And I've been there 2 or 3 times, and so I know this. And so people try to, you know, see whether they can get the first, second, third, or fourth slot, you know, very early. Now, once it passes that slot, where president, because you see, the presidents are in town not just to speak at the GA, but to do other things. And this is what exactly you saw happen. But as to the speech itself, you know, for one who's been involved in doing some of these things, I think that he said all the right things. But as I have had to explain, I think last year when I also heard the speech, I started saying, you know what? We need to review and recast our speeches and our demands as occasions like this. Because when you make some of these demands, and begin to explain what you want, some of these countries that you are addressing your speech to might not take you seriously because virtually everything you are saying, they have done. Virtually everything you are saying, they've done. And it was not only President Tinubu that was making, in fact, most African leaders who spoke that I was able to, to see, they were making the same demand that they've been making over the years. We don't need it, but we need a fair trading system. Take our own case. Even if they say today we have a fair trading system, what is Nigeria going to sell beyond oil? What are we going to sell and to whom? So the problem, we need to find a way to let them know that our country, which for me is the most important thing, it's not only set and ready, but we must also be sure that when we are saying we are set and ready, that we are genuinely set and ready so that local investors, foreign investors would have that confidence to do business with you.
Well, to the president's credit, he's been selling Nigeria quite strongly, even before arriving at the UNGA during the G2022 summit, I believe, in India, the G20 summit, beg your pardon, in India. The president also, gave the remark, Nigeria is ready for business when he met with, those key business leaders in India, saying Nigeria is open. He also made the same remark, I think, at the NASDAQ, where he was supposed to ring the closing bell. He gave, in a short address, also mentioned Nigeria is open. He said the same thing. He's just been selling Nigeria all over the place.
Amarachi, sorry to interrupt you. Go back to history. Which Nigerian president since 1999 has not said the same thing? Which Nigerian president? Just give me one that has not said the same thing. Just give me one that has not said the same thing.
To be honest,
I'm just saying which one. Because look, that's the job of the president, to sell Nigeria. And every Nigerian president since, even before, when our presidents go out, we go out, when I was in service, we travel with them. They say the same thing. So it's the job of the president, he's saying the right thing, but for the people to respond, that's what I'm saying. We need to do more homework. We need to do a lot more at the domestic level. Fair enough, good salesmanship. But even if you're working for a company and you go out selling your company, the people you are talking to will come back to that company to do one or two business, only to find out that they can't do much. Because what you said out there is different from the reality on the ground. That's the point I'm trying to make. So good speed, good salesmanship and the rest of it. But let's sit down here, get things going first. Get things going first. And then you begin to see that the world will respond to you.
Some analysts, Ambassador, would disagree with some of your perception of the way Nigeria has performed on the international scene, especially at the UNGA. Nigeria's performance on the global stage, they would say that, this UNGA really brought out Nigeria, Nigeria put her good foot forward, and would say that, there were so many benefits. Nigeria's stance on the international scene has improved. But what do you think? And I'm sure you're going to tell me.
I was in the team. I think with the Nigerian, was it not the economic summit? There was another group that organized President Obasanjo's trip in 1999, I think. The same thing was, go look at the newspapers and everything. The same assurance was given. He even had more meetings. visited a lot of other companies and the rest. Look, I am not condemning and I'm not criticizing the speech. All I'm saying is everything that needs to be said, fair enough, was said. But at the end of the day, just like I pointed out that report to you that said governors, almost all the state governors travel out all the time to look for foreign investment. They came back empty-handed. I don't know what happened, but I'm just putting the report. But even if somebody else things had happened, the point is that there are a lot of challenges that we need to address at the domestic level. Once you address those challenges, fair, good speech. But now that you've come back, you need to begin to address those challenges so that when the investors come back to look at Nigeria itself, they will not go back and not return. That's the point I'm trying to make. So they are analysts, they are free to criticize, but if they sit down and think about it very well, all I'm saying is for us to gain from what the president did, we now have to sit down at home and begin to put a number of things in place. I don't think that's too much to do.
I think that is the main thing to do, Ambassador. That will be the main takeaway from the UN. That'll be the main takeaway from the UNGA. But as we always ask, what impact do you think the 78th UN General Assembly had on Nigeria?
Well, look, it's still ongoing, by the way, but
the leaders have left. Our own president is back in the country.
It's good at least that Nigerian presence was felt, that the president was there and he spoke, he gave all the assurances. And so people believe that, okay, things are moving in Nigeria. But there's still a question mark. And that is also one of those things that we need to always remind ourselves, that we do not have to pray and hope that outsiders will at any given time be the ones to legitimize a president elected in Nigeria. So therefore, in any election at all, we need to do the right thing. So that when our president, the elected president, is making his first appearance anywhere in the world, no hindrance, no incumbencies, and, he's going freshly minted, and everybody would like to see a new president for Nigeria that has the full support of the Nigerian people, and not everybody being a little bit cautious because there's still a final judgment to be made. Whichever way it goes, I just think I know where to go and so on. But the fact that it is still there, puts a question mark. It's like everybody says, let's wait and see. So it's good. Everybody knows Nigeria is, things are moving in Nigeria or things will move in Nigeria. But the fact that we have this hanging on us is something that our politicians should, for goodness sake, try to avoid going forward, particularly when it comes to issues of election. Let's try for a change to have one credible election that when our president goes to anywhere, the people out there will not be reading something coming out from Nigeria. Look, you don't know how embarrassing this could be, because I've been in that position, once or twice, where I've gone to speak to defend Nigeria, and the report was coming from Nigeria. This was on the toxic waste that was found in cocoa. It was so embarrassing, to find yourself in that kind of situation. So our presidents from Nigeria at any given time must go out with confidence, assertiveness, and fully aware of the fact that there's no question mark when you are speaking and addressing the world at any stage at all.
Are you trying to say that this president had question marks regarding his legitimization?
No, I'm not saying he has question mark, but there are still issues that needs to be resolved.
Okay.
Right? Okay. There are still issues that needs to be resolved. Look, we do not live in we do not live in isolation. We live in a global village. The world took interest in the last Nigerian election. The world is aware of what's going on in Nigeria, for goodness sake. So they'll be looking at it. They are aware of the fact that, yes, the Court of Appeal has, Electoral Tribunal has given has given its judgment. They are aware of the appeal. So the case has gone to Supreme Court. As long as these things, the process is still on, it does not argue well. I'm not talking of President Tinubu now. I'm talking in general terms. That anytime we do things in this country, we must remember that we do not live in isolation. We live in a global village. And technology has made it, so easy for people to access, to see, and to hear what's going on in every country of the world. And so whatever happens here, the world also knows that it's happening in Nigeria, and they will follow it. So when you have a president that people is talking to are aware of the fact that he still has a case in court about his election, I say it is not a good feeling for the country itself. This has nothing to do with President Tinubu. That's why I said, moving forward, politicians in this country, and INEC in particular, should try and ensure that we have a credible election so that when our presidents go out on their first assignment, no question is asked about their legitimacy.
These conversations I have with you, sometimes I wish they wouldn't end. Unfortunately, they have come to an end for today regarding this topic. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your impressions, and your perceptions with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
This is where we end Diplomatic Channel this week. Don't forget you can watch this episode and others that you missed by clicking on the playlist at youtube.com/channelsweb and clicking on Diplomatic Channel. You can reach me on any of the social media platforms at Amarachi_Ubani on Twitter or X, Ubani Amarachi on Facebook, and Amarachi Ubani on Instagram. I'll see you next time.